Love and trust, two things that I thought for a long time that I could never achieve in my life. I was an innocent boy, untouched by the dirt that life sometimes throws at you when the incident that started it all happened. There's a line from Charles Dickens' classic that best describes my childhood. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Forget my parents, if it weren't for my grandmother and my best friend in the world, Jeremy, I would never have even left elementary school, much less graduated from college. It took 20 years before I could finally look in the mirror every morning and not think about what it took to get to this point. Nightmares have practically disappeared. What about anger? Well, he's under control too. Unfortunately, however, there was a price to pay. We buried my grandmother just before my 24th birthday, a loss that I still feel. Jeremy and his wife Cindy continue to be there when I need advice, which fortunately is not often. Regina, the love of my life, says that she understands how I feel because she, like me, has faced problems in her life, but always had the support of a loving and caring family, which I did not have. So I smile, kiss her, and thank her for being in my life. 3 days before my 5th birthday, my mom left my dad and me. Remembering that day, the first thing that comes to mind is the volume louder than usual in our house. I couldn't hear what they were arguing about, and at 5 years old, I probably wouldn't have understood anyway. However, when I heard glass breaking along with screams, I walked from our living room, where I was trying to watch TV, to the doorway leading to the kitchen. My mother would take everything out of the cabinets and throw it on the floor, all the while screaming at my father, who was standing less than 5 feet away from her on the other side of the countertop, screaming back. I was scared. This feeling came over me at that moment. All I could think about was how adults don't act like that, or shouldn't, right? I must have started crying because I heard my dad yell at my mom. "Look what you're doing. You're scaring the hell out of your own son." I remember how he came over, picked me up, kissed me, and hugged me, carrying me out of the kitchen. "You're really wow, you know," he shouted over his shoulder to his mother. She shouted something back that would have made me wash my mouth out with soap, and continued to throw everything around in the kitchen. He put me on the ground, telling me to go watch TV, but I wasn't going anywhere. They're back to their old ways. Names were thrown back and forth, and when Mom stopped, I thought that was the end until next time. "I don't need this," she shouted, grabbing her coat and car keys. "I'm leaving and won't come back." "God forbid the door hits you on the ass on the way out, slut," my dad quickly responded, but all I heard was my mom saying she was leaving us. I cried hysterically and ran after her, out the kitchen door and into the garage. "Mommy, mommy," I shouted, following closely behind her. "Damn, go back to the house," was all she said to me, but I wasn't about to let her leave. She literally ran to her car parked in the driveway. When I caught up with her, tears were streaming down my cheeks as I tried to grab her. I said to go back to the house, "Do you hear?" I tried to reach her, grabbing everything I could. Now, with both hands around her waist, I thought I had stopped her from leaving. She released my small hands. "Stephen Joseph, I told you to go back to the house now." I tried to reach her again, and that's when it happened. Whether she wanted it or not, she did it anyway, and it remains in my memory to this day. I immediately felt the burning and heat from the slap, and time stopped for me. My mother had never slapped me before. Hell, she never even spanked me. I was shocked. I just stood and looked into her tear-stained eyes. Something died in me that day. Until this moment, I was innocent, untouched, and now I will be marked for the rest of my life. "You bitch, get away from him," my father shouted. He grabbed me and carried me back to the house. But even that step didn't stop my little brain from trying to figure out how my mother could do this to me. I thought she loved me. I didn't cry anymore. I was speechless. Dad sat me down on the sofa. He looked out the front window, watching my mom drive away. The neighbors who were home at the time put on quite a show that day, and they still talk about that little display in our driveway. The next 24 to 48 hours passed in a blur. My grandmother came and some plan was made regarding the who, what, where, when, and why of my meager existence. From that day on, my grandmother was there every morning when I woke up and stayed with me until my dad returned from work. And my loving mother, well, that became my problem after my father and his family washed their hands of it. Almost a month passed before I saw my mother again. My grandmother took me to her parents' house. I had to spend all of Saturday and most of Sunday with her. Loving and caring, that's what she was that weekend. Nothing was said about what she did the day she left, and all I really cared about was being with her again. As soon as I get settled, you'll move in with me, she promised over and over, and at 5 years old, I had no reason not to believe her. But no matter how many times she said it, it never happened. Her weekly visits became once every 2 weeks, then once a month, and finally I felt like I only saw her on holidays and special occasions, especially as I got older. I think it all came to a head when I was dropped off at my grandparents' house one Friday after school, and she didn't come see me once that entire weekend. Her parents, my grandparents, always made sure I was busy, but I didn't come to them. I needed my mother, but did she still want me? Honey, your mom had to work this weekend, they told me. She has an important job, and you should be proud of her. I didn't care about her important job. I just wanted her. I guess I just wasn't important enough. After that weekend, if my mother wanted to see me, my father would force her to pick me up at our house. She said she loved me only when I saw her now. There was always some man with her. I think I was 13 when she came to pick me up one Friday night, taking her other boyfriend with her. I looked at her and closed the door. After that, I never spent weekends with her again. She called and texted me, that's all. Like I said, in her eyes, I was no longer important. I was replaced by someone, or better yet, someone else in her life. Eventually, I realized that I no longer wanted to be another liability for her. Children can be mean, especially if you are not part of their special group or clique. At first, it was just questions about why I didn't have a mother. I would tell them that I have a mother, she just doesn't live with us anymore. Later came ridicule, name-calling, and finally pushing and shoving. I don't know how many times I came home from school crying. My grandmother was always by my side, kissing and hugging me. As I got older, it didn't help me get rid of the cuts, bruises, and hurt feelings. After a particularly bad day at school, I came home with a black eye. A boy at school said that his father told him that my mother was a tramp and my father kicked her out because of it. We repeated, "It's not like that, it's like that," probably a dozen or more times before I finally pushed him. Then he and his two buddies started beating the crap out of me. If it weren't for Jeremy, I don't know what would have happened. He came up behind them and pulled them away from me. 2 against 3, we fought a pretty good fight, but we got the worst of it. It's hard not to since they were older and bigger than us. After that day, Jeremy and I became inseparable. When my father saw me, he was furious. He looked at my face and turned red with rage. "Who did this to you?" "A couple of older boys," was my answer, looking at the floor and looking into his eyes, embarrassed. "How many were there?" When I told him the whole story, including what Jeremy had done, he sat me down on the ottoman in front of his chair. "Steve, life sucks most of the time. If you are not willing to fight for what you want, there will always be someone who will try to take it away from you. You'll never be a fighter, you're too small, but that doesn't mean you have to give in to them. It just means you have to be smarter and be willing to do whatever it takes to win. Understand?" I didn't, but I was soon to learn what an equalizer was. It was 8 inches long and had a leather strap that I could put my hand through. It was the handle from my old wooden baseball bat. Now this was my balance. Don't look for a fight, but if one happens, don't run away. If they see you're not letting yourself be bullied anymore, they'll stop, and if they don't, make them pay until they stop. My grandmother was not happy and told my father that scripture says to turn the other cheek. "Ma, the only thing this does is give them another place to strike. The sooner he realizes that nothing in this world is free, the better off he will be." Dad showed me how to use it, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to go to school. 3 days is how long it took. Jeremy and I were walking home from school when the group that attacked us, plus one other, stopped us. "Your mom is an easy girl and your dad is a coward," said the big guy in front with a stupid grin on his face. I remembered what my father had said about trying to avoid a fight, so we tried to get around them. "Did you hear what I said? Your dad is a coward, so I guess you are too," he shouted. Laughing, he grabbed me from behind and pulled me to the ground. I was able to take it out of my backpack, put my hand through the leather strap and wait. I was just starting to get to my feet when he tried to hit me. With my balance in my right hand, I swung and hit him in the lower left leg. His screams were music to my ears. I swung again and hit him in the upper left arm. Now he was the one who found himself on the ground, sobbing like a small child. With newfound courage, I turned and looked at the stunned group. I saw fear in their eyes. I watched as they all took a step back. I turned and looked at my attacker. "If I hear one more word from you about my mom or dad, or if you touch me again, I will break one of your arms, understand?" I hit his arm again when he didn't respond. This caught his attention. "Okay," was all he said, looking up at me. Jeremy and I walked through the group. Although I was still terrified, I felt good. My heart was beating like crazy, I was drenched in sweat, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim. When I told my grandmother, she lectured me. "Violence doesn't solve anything. If you just walked away, they'd leave you alone." I loved my grandmother to death, but she was from a time when people were kinder. This was no longer the case. All my father did was smile when I told him. He warned me against overconfidence, saying that perhaps they would leave me alone now. Although the fight did not occur on school grounds, 2 days later my father and I, along with all the other parents and children, were called to the principal's office for a meeting. My father told me not to say anything while we listened to the parents of the boy I hit. They talked a lot about how much pain Timmy was in and how I could have broken his arm and ruined his chances of getting a baseball scholarship. Other parents also said their children were deeply traumatized by the violence they witnessed. Everything was not going in my favor. When my father stood up and started to leave, the director asked where he was going. "After listening to all this nonsense for the last 20 minutes, I think I need some fresh air." "Mr. Moore, you don't seem to be taking this matter very seriously," the principal said as he stood up to face my father, a bad move. "But I'm serious, otherwise I wouldn't have made this baton for my son and taught him how to use it. Maybe the next time 4 bullies decide to attack one little boy, they'll think twice about what could happen." My father reached out to the parents of the boy who originally attacked me. "But honestly, I wish he'd actually broken your son's arm. Then he'd understand what it's like to be attacked day after day. And if you're interested, I have a witness who can tell you what they started." My son was only defending himself. The room was now quite quiet. "As I see it, we have 2 options. One, you can give each of these little rascals a detention for being a total pain in the ass, or I can contact the school board and let them know that our school's principal openly allows his students to be bullied." My father turned to the director. "The choice is yours." With the director now stuttering, my father grabbed my hand, and we began to walk away, holding our heads high. Right before he left, he turned to the father of the boy I hit. "Oh, by the way, I knew your wife when she was in high school, and she was one of the most famous girls available, so I guess that makes you a coward." My father smiled. He didn't wait for the answer he knew would never come. Instead, we just walked out. I loved my father. I wish I could say that growing up, my father was always there for me, but why lie? He gave me everything I needed physically, but he didn't give me what the 2 women in my life gave me: love and warmth. It was important to him to be strong and tough, and never show his vulnerability because it was a sign of weakness. Real men are not weak, that's what he instilled in me. My grandmother became my surrogate mother and always tried her best for me. She made me feel loved, wanted, and tried to instill in me how to treat others. And by others, I mean members of the opposite sex. Although my father occasionally dated women, he did so in such a way as to never expose them to me. He always made sure I was in bed if he brought someone home with him. Sometimes I heard my father and his date in his bedroom, but I never said a word about it. There was to be no talk of the birds and the bees in front of him. He just assumed I knew, or would have picked it up on the street, like he probably did. However, when I was old enough to date, he told me that if I even thought about doing this to a girl without protection, he and I would have a heart-to-heart, and I wouldn't like it very much. 3 days later, I found a box of condoms on my bed. I guess he wasn't taking any chances. Your dad is so cool, my best friend Jeremy said. My father would never do this for me. I gave him half the box because at the time I wasn't even dating, and he was. Jeremy and I have been best friends ever since he helped me ward off those bullies after school one day. We were in the same class, but usually not in the same class. We lived a couple of blocks from each other, and after school we would meet at either my house or his house. My grandmother called him her adopted son, and his parents liked me so much that I was always invited to open dinners. They knew about my mom and dad, but they never brought it up. When we started high school, Jeremy played football, and I ran cross country and played soccer. We were still thick as thieves. Even when we started dating, it seemed like we continued to put each other first. Well, Jeremy did that until his senior year, when he met Cindy. He fell so hard and fast that I told him he would need a shovel to dig himself out. He was so in love with it. She wasn't the prettiest girl in the class, but you'd never know it from the way he talked about her. I wish I had such a person. I've had my share of dates. I've just never found one as special as him. Most of the girls I dated were easygoing and thought of themselves as God's gift to men, or in my case, boys. When a couple of them were playing games with me, I called them out on it. If they didn't want to date me, all they had to do was say so instead of lying to me because I always found out about it. Guys, unlike girls, weren't good at keeping dating secrets and usually bragged about it the next day. I assumed I could have been a little more gentle with them, but lying and trust were two huge issues for me. In college, I felt like I fell in love not once, but twice. Debbie was great. We merged in different ways, then I found out that she wants to travel the world and the children. Well, she'll be too busy for that nonsense. Our relationship did not last long. After 6 months of dating, I introduced Rosemary to my family. Everyone thought we were made for each other, even me, until I caught her in a lie, and a big one at that. We had a bit of a rocky start. She was dating a guy named Kenny. The relationship had run its course, and she tried to break it off with him. We talked, went to a couple of movies, and I even went out to dinner a few times, trying to convince her to leave this asshole, her words not mine. Look, let me make this very clear, I told her over dinner one night. I really like you, but I'm a lonely man. I don't share with anyone. If you want to date me, it must be on an exclusive basis. I don't want to have to wonder what you're doing when we're not together. I thought I explained this quite clearly, but apparently not. I still don't know how many times she lied to me. The problem was not the quantity, but the fact that she did it at all. This was a big problem for me. I don't even know if she slept with anyone else, and looking back I know she probably didn't, but once I realized she was lying to me, she was history. It was Friday evening. Rosemary said she was getting together with a few of her friends to hang out. No problem. This would give me a chance to catch up with a few of my friends that I've been neglecting lately. Friday nights were usually full of parties on and off campus. Even if you weren't of legal drinking age, alcohol could be purchased, and you didn't have to look too far, especially if you were a girl. The Brotherhood of Rats, that's what I called them. Frat boys whose main mission in life was to get girls drunk at parties just so they could have sex with them. Everyone knew what was going on at these parties, especially in the two most famous dorms that always had problems with the college and were usually on probation. I never went to their parties, although many of my friends did. As I said, this was a man's conversation. Guys have no loyalty, especially if they have a chance to get some casual sex. One of my friends told me that Rosemary and 3 of her friends were at a frat party on Friday night. He said he wasn't sure if she was drunk, but she was definitely making out with one of the guys on the makeshift dance floor. Steve, I don't know how far they went, but they kissed pretty passionately for at least 6 songs. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I think you should know. I was furious. Even if she was drunk, she shouldn't have kissed anyone but me. This weekend, I was waiting for her to call me. I had no intention of calling her. Finally, on Sunday morning, she called. Where were you? You didn't call and... I interrupted her. Rosemary, I'm trying to figure out a problem I can't figure out. Can I help? I know I can help you figure it out. She laughed. I didn't. How was Friday night with your girlfriends? What did you end up doing? I took her at her word and wanted to see what I could catch. We just stayed home with a few bottles of wine and talked all night, girl talk. So you didn't even go out. I gave her one last chance to tell the truth. She didn't take it. No, after a couple of hours, neither of us was able to walk, let alone drive. I quickly ended the call, and when I hung up, I really think Rosemary thought she had outsmarted me. Over the next week, her calls, text messages, and emails went unanswered. Where are you and why don't you answer the phone? She asked, probably a little irritated. This came to a head when she was waiting for me outside her accounting class. Steve, what's going on with you lately? I can't reach you. Why do you want to talk to me like that? Was my sharp answer. Steve, why are you talking to me like that? If I didn't know better, I'd think you were mad at me for some reason. Rosemary, I want you to think twice and tell me again what you did last Friday night. She saw that something was wrong. You just hung out with a few girlfriends and a couple bottles of wine, right? Yes, like I said before. So what you're saying is that Gary lied to me when he said he saw you and 3 of your girlfriends at the Alpha frat house on Friday night, and you didn't dance or make out with any guy there at all. Is that it? She started to get nervous. The look in her eyes said I was right. Steve, she started, but I interrupted her. Because if he is right, we would be finished completely, because you know my attitude towards lies. Thank God, you are not that kind of woman, and I can trust you unconditionally, no matter what. Tears began to accumulate in her eyes. She realized that she was caught. I didn't say anything because I knew you'd be angry. They talked me into going. They forced you to stick your tongue down his throat. How far did you go that night? Did you give yourself to him? Did you give him your panties as a souvenir of his subjugation? Her tears were now flowing freely. I was over it and over her. Why do I keep meeting women like my damn mother? I have to go, I have class. With this, I left her life. I didn't respond to her emails, especially the ones where she tried to explain everything. It was just one time, and she was sorry. Me too, but it didn't matter. We were history. Sorry, man, Jeremy said sympathetically as we had a couple of beers later that night. I thought you and Rosemary were made for each other. That's what I thought. I'm just glad I found out now and not 10 years later like my father. Let me ask you a question. I looked him straight in the eyes. Has Cindy ever lied to you? He looked at me strangely. Have you ever caught her in a lie? No, I don't remember. And besides, even if she lied, it would have to be very serious for me to leave her like you left Rosemary. Well then, can you give it to me? I can't find a good one, but you found it the first time. With your luck, you can always find another one. Even if I said yes, that I'm not going to, Cindy would never go for it. She thinks you're too strict and expects too much from people. Repeat. I couldn't believe what I just heard. She just thinks you expect too much from people. Steve, everyone lies, even if it's little white lies, so they don't hurt someone's feelings. And don't talk bullshit to me because I've heard you lie too. These aren't the lies I'm talking about. The lies I take to heart are about relationships. If Rosemary were your girlfriend, what would you do? She outright lied to me. She seriously kissed another guy. I gave her a chance to get out of jail not once, but twice, and she still lied to my face. Steve, I think she was ashamed of what she had done, and perhaps thought that if she could get out this time, she would never be in that situation again. The problem is you don't forgive and forget. Everything is black or white. I had 2 great teachers. You can't blame your parents forever. People get divorced all the time. So your mom cheated on your dad. Not every woman cheats. I knew he was right, I just hadn't met the right girl yet, and since he wasn't going to give me Cindy, I'd have to find a good one of my own. They say the first week after graduating from college is one of the best weeks of your life. There are no more papers to take or tests to study for. You can relax and enjoy your free time, and that's exactly what I did. I had 2 job offers and an interview on Thursday morning. My life moved forward, lonely, but still forward. That's when it happened. The evening rush hour was moving slower than usual, and I was kicking myself for getting out on the road for no particular reason. The asshole in the car behind me was constantly trying to get out of traffic, desperately trying to get one car ahead. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, shook my head, and turned up the volume on the radio. As we slowly moved forward, he must have seen an opening ahead and slammed on the gas, trying to get ahead while everyone stopped again, everyone except him. He slammed straight into the left rear of my car, pushing it into the car in front of me. What an idiot, I thought, turning off the engine and getting out to assess the damage, knowing that now I wouldn't go anywhere. He cursed and yelled, saying it wasn't his fault and what an idiot I was for stopping right in front of him. I then walked to the front of my car to see what damage my car had done to the car in front of me. She was attractive, arrogant, and extremely loud. She got out of her car and started yelling at me, using language worthy of a dock worker. The driver of the car that hit me crawled back into his car before she could see him. There was something along the lines of "Jesus Christ, son of a bitch," and a bunch of other nonsense mixed with a dozen foreign words uttered by what seemed to be a high-strung Latina. Damn, I just made the last payment on my car, and you ran into that son of a bitch. Do you even have a driver's license? And if you do, did you win it in a box of crackers? She shouted. When I didn't answer or say a word, she wanted to know what the hell I was going to do about her car. I wasn't quite sure how to answer at first. I was just glad she wasn't hurt. Look, I'm sorry I crashed into you, but the guy in the Mustang behind me crashed into me and pushed me into you. I'm just glad everything's okay. Well, it's not okay, because he couldn't wait 10 seconds for the light to change. I'm going to be late picking up my daughter at daycare. She went on a tirade as she stood there in a light blue sundress with her arms crossed. Her eyes burned 1,000 holes into the other guy as he sank lower in the front seat, trying to hide from her. Look, I said, even when the cops come, which could be in 20 minutes or an hour, all they'll do is take statements from everyone and make sure we exchanged insurance information. Why don't we exchange driver's license numbers, telephone numbers, insurance numbers, and we can all leave? She looked at her watch, burned a couple more holes in that guy's head with her gaze, and said, okay. I took out a notepad and started writing. The idiot didn't have his insurance card on him, but we got the rest of his information. When he started talking to Regina, that was the woman's name, apologizing to her, he made the mistake of looking at her breasts, which were not small, and it was all in plain sight. Hey, asshole, my eyes are up here, not up there, she blurted, getting in his face. I realized that Regina was ready to explode. Why don't we all calm down and get this over with so we can leave? I turned to look at her. And don't worry, he's 100% at fault. His insurance company will pay our insurance companies. Who will pay my deductible for repairing my car? You probably will have to, but you should get them back from his insurance company or mine. I gave her all my information, telling her I hoped her insurance company would take care of her. No, I prayed that they would take care of her. This was one lady I wouldn't want to deal with. Don't worry, if they don't make it, the rest will be taken out of that guy's ass, she said, burning another hole in the center of his forehead just in case. I felt bad for the poor guy if his insurance company couldn't handle it. I wasn't sure if mine would cope considering the accident wasn't my fault. And I definitely didn't want to deal with that wild cat. Within 25 minutes of the accident, we each had everything we needed, to the delight of all the cars trying to pass us. Meanwhile, the police arrived, giving each of us a form to fill out an accident report. When they found out the guy in the Mustang didn't have his insurance information on him, he was fined. It's deserved. After what seemed like hours, but was actually about 45 minutes, I finally headed home. I had 2 interviews the following week and scheduled a third for the following Monday. The job I really wanted offered a lower salary than the other two, but offered more opportunities for advancement. I was tasked with coordinating the engineering, purchasing, and manufacturing departments to ensure that schedules were met on time and that necessary changes were made to projects to avoid delays. It can be quite stressful at times. I can guarantee you won't be bored, the interviewer warned and encouraged me. This sounded exactly like what I was looking for. A few weeks after my second and third interviews, I accepted the offer and was ready to start working. Life is pretty good right now. My insurance company told me that the guy who hit me didn't have insurance. The damage to my car will be repaired under my policy. I knew I wouldn't get my deductible back. I called this idiot. He said he was fired a few weeks ago and is broke, adding that as soon as he finds another job, he will make things right. Yes, of course, when the pigs fly, I thought. I should have expected the call, but I didn't. However, when I answered the phone, I immediately knew who it was. This scoundrel doesn't even have insurance, let alone a job, were the first words out of her mouth. He said he'd pay me. Yeah, what a lie. I can't hold my breath. I'll probably have to get it from your insurance company. Good evening, Regina, I began, trying to start our conversation on a positive note. I've already sent in my accident report and everything. If you want, I'll be happy to give you my agent's name and number. Give me your name and phone number just in case I run into problems. My car is already being repaired, so I need to get this over with once and for all. I gave her everything she asked for. I hope everything goes well for you, I said optimistically. Don't worry, it will be, she hung up. I wonder if I'll have to find a new insurance agent after she talks to him, I thought, regretting the next call my agent was about to receive. 2 weeks after Regina's call, Jeremy, Cindy, and I went out to celebrate my new job. This was a big step for me. I was looking forward to moving into my own place and finally getting out from under my father's wing. We had dinner at a nice Mexican restaurant. After eating, we went to one of the new dance clubs. To be honest, I don't really know how to dance. I try to move my legs, my arms, and try not to look like a complete idiot on the dance floor. Personally, I like it when it's dark, crowded, and after a couple of beers. We had just finished our first round of drinks when we were lucky enough to snag a table from a group that was leaving. Considering how crowded it was, the tables were worth their weight in gold. The club was nice, the music sounded great, and I was actually having fun when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone walking towards our table. Damn, was all I could say before she was on top of me. Steve, your insurance company worked, thank God, Regina began, not bothering with a greeting or other introduction. I'd still like to take a big damn hammer and smash that guy and his shitty car. Jeremy and Cindy sat with their mouths open as they listened to Regina's tirade. Regina, this is my best friend Jeremy and his girlfriend Cindy. I tried to change the subject. Want to join us for drinks? She looked over her shoulder at the group she had just left with and nodded. I guess one drink won't hurt. What can I bring you? Surprise me, she said, grinning from ear to ear, which was easy for her considering she didn't have a small mouth. I grabbed Jeremy and we headed to the bar. Is that the girl you bumped into? The first question from Jeremy's mouth. She seems cute, but what a mouth she has. I thought Cindy would choke on her drink. We both laughed at this. Regina was not a little girl by any means. She could look me straight in the eyes, which must have made her about 5 feet 8 inches in stockings. She had huge breasts and an ass that could rival any black girl. She wasn't fat, but she wasn't thin either. I would guess her weight was between 150 and 165 pounds. She, my friend, was not created for speed, but for comfort. She has great breasts, and the way they hold up in that dress is an architectural marvel. Jeremy was on the verge of salivating. We returned to the table with drinks in hand, and I gave Jeremy some advice. Unless you want to die a horrible death, don't look at her breasts. I can tell you from experience that she doesn't like it. We looked at each other again and laughed again before reaching our table. Here you go, ladies. We handed out drinks. Regina looked at hers and then at me. Why do you think I drink red wine? Now I find myself in a quandary. Well, you don't seem like a white wine drinker, although sometimes I think you prefer something stronger. But for a casual evening out so you don't get drunk, a light red wine is something you might like, he replied. I told her and then took a sip of my Corona. Not bad, not bad. We touched glasses. Where's your girlfriend? She looked around. No girl, just the three of us celebrating my new job. Are you after men? The beer coming out of your nose stings like hell, and the subsequent cough isn't fun either. No. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I was still coming to my senses. Well, you're a nice guy, and if you don't have a girlfriend, I just assumed you must be into men. You know, that's the trend these days, isn't it? No, I don't like men, if you're wondering. I like women, I just don't have anyone right now. Give it up, huh? No, I didn't. If you're wondering, I dumped her. Cindy was now trying her best not to laugh at our conversations. So she didn't want to, or are you just tired of her? Regina, why are you interested in this? Just talking. Guess I touched on some touchy subject, huh? She lied to me. That's why we're not together anymore. Satisfied? I guess, but it had to be something really serious for you to almost snap at me, huh? She just didn't stop. I looked to Cindy and Jeremy for help. Forget they used us for their evening entertainment. Lies and betrayal are two things I don't tolerate from anyone, I said, perhaps too loudly because several people around me were paying attention. I've been through this too, and it's not fun. But from what I see, most men are unreliable. They lie to you to get in your pants, and after they get it, they leave forever. Nonsense. Women are just as bad as men. They lie, hoping they don't get caught, and if they do, they blink their eyes, wiggle their butts, maybe shed a few tears, then say they're sorry, thinking that's it. We'll fix it, but not in my book. They do it because it's been that way their whole lives. There's a double standard, and you know it. A woman who sleeps with a couple of men gets labeled as available, but when a man gets more than a couple of girls, he becomes a hero. Then, when a man decides to get married, he wants an untouched virgin, not a girl who walks around the block like him. This is complete nonsense. Don't girls play games? If a guy is handsome and has money, you girls fall at his feet just to meet him. But if he's an ordinary guy, say, with a 10-year-old car, most women won't even give him time, let alone agree to meet him. Girls love to date bad guys and those who treat them badly, but when it comes time to get a life, they return to the solid, stable ones they never even noticed before. Accountants, computer people, geeks, regular 9-to-5 workers, etc. Suddenly, they become very loving, telling them how they would like to meet them. Bullshit. All they are looking for now is a damn safety net, because their bad guys are not. For marriage, and will not give them what this poor naive guy will give. Once they are established, if someone better is found, they will not hesitate to cheat on their husband because they know that he will probably forgive them. I was furious, my heart was beating like crazy, and I was lashing out at a girl I barely knew. Now everyone was really looking at me. Looks like someone really hurt your ego, Regina said, looking straight at me. You may be right about some women, but not all. Like you, I've been scammed a few times, so maybe I keep my guard up. But unlike you, I give people a chance before I jump on them. Them. Regina stood up. Well, that was educational. I have to get back to my friends. Call me if you want to discuss this again. With these words, she returned to her group. Cindy and Jeremy just looked at me, and after she was out of earshot, they burst out laughing. What? Boy, this girl definitely knows your number, Cindy said. Smart, beautiful, and with a lot of baggage. If I were you, I would marry her as soon as possible. Ha ha. Am I one big joke now? Look, I didn't ask for any of this. People have been stepping on my feet and choking me my whole life, except Grandma and Jeremy. And sorry if I have a few problems with trust. You would have too if you went through what I went through. But Steve, Don't you see how this is stopping you from moving forward and becoming the person you can be? Cindy answered. Steve, I love you to death, but one day you're going to have to open up, let down your guards, and trust someone, even if it hurts you. Life is too short for you to wonder, every time you meet someone. What if? Take a risk once, and perhaps one day you will find what you are looking for. A couple more drinks, and we were ready to leave. Regina looked at me, waved goodbye, and we headed home. In the car, Cindy started pestering me again. Jeremy knew better than to keep his mouth shut. He wasn't stupid. Cindy hugged me goodbye, and I walked into my house with my mind too busy. I waited almost 2 weeks before calling her again. I still had her phone number after the accident, and I thought, what the hell, what do I have to lose? It was Tuesday, and I decided it was early enough to take her to dinner on Saturday. She had plans. The next week it was the same. The third week I called on Monday. Guess what she said? I didn't call the next week, but lo and behold, who did I see on Saturday at the same club I was at a month ago? When she arrived about an hour after I arrived, I was ready for what would happen next. Good evening, Steve, she began the conversation, but that was all she had time to say. What, did you come for a free drink or just to get into a puddle? I answered before she could say anything else. Because if that's the case, please find yourself another sucker. Damn, the words were literally pouring out of her mouth in both Spanish and English. She called me everything except the tall white guy. I don't even think she took a deep breath while she threw out her second portion of what I thought were insults at me. What really angered her was when I turned my back on her after telling her that I had better things to do than argue with a wayward woman. Few English words were spoken now as I watched her eyes turn red, her cheeks flush, and her voice rise 2 octaves. I'm tired of her endless tirades. We started to attract a crowd, and I needed to finish it. Regina, if you didn't want to date me, all you had to say was that you don't date skinny white guys. Instead of telling me crap, I would have understood. Lying only confirms my theory that the only thing what hot women care about is themselves. I'm done arguing. She left in a rage, and the crowd that had gathered around us soon dispersed. My friends Gary and Rick just stood there and looked at me. That was incredibly cool, Gary said, high-fiving me. I would never dare say that to any girl. I'm still shocked that she didn't punch you in the face or kick you between the legs or something like that. My ex-girlfriend probably would have punched me in the chair. Don't look back now, but there's one hot Latina woman coming at 10 o'clock, Rick warned, letting me know. When she approached me, she made sure we were standing face to face before she started. FYI, I was really busy those days, and if you had called me this week, you would have found out that I would have agreed to go on a date with you, but now that will never happen. She spoke looking me straight in the eyes, not allowing me to look away. Besides, you will never be able to touch this hot figure, and that will be your loss. There was no chance I would leave this unanswered, I retorted. So tell me, what will you do when all your friends get bored of you and leave you alone in bed? Will you then wonder what it would be like if you met someone who wanted to be with you because who you are, not what you can do for them? Her wide eyes said it all. I left that night feeling pretty good, knowing that this time it wasn't my fault. I was having dinner with my dad on Tuesday night when my cell phone rang. I looked at the number and wondered if I should answer. Dad, I need to answer, I told him as I walked out onto the patio. What do you want, Regina? To begin a truce. I'm listening. Listen, you don't know anything about me. If I said I was busy, I was busy. I'm not lying. And one more thing, I won't let anyone talk to me like that, okay? We started off on the wrong foot. If you want to try again, I'm ready. If not, like I said, your loss. You say that all the time. Well, you keep saying I'm hot. We both laughed at this. Okay, how about dinner on Saturday night? I can't, I'm busy. But you just said. I said I was busy on Saturday at the church market, but not on Friday. Okay, how about meeting on Friday night? It would be great to go on a date with you on Friday night. See, it wasn't that hard. We talked for another half hour. mostly about trifles, or, as I like to call it, little things. She gave me her address and told me to pick her up around 7 o'clock. Be prepared, I still live at home with my parents, and you'll get more than one checkup. I think I can handle it. Steve, you don't know my family. She was right. Why couldn't she be ready and wait for me so that we could leave as soon as possible? Her father greeted me at the door with a firm handshake. Looking inside, I saw two other large men leaning on the mantelpiece in the living room. They were partially hidden by 8 women, all of them watching and watching me as I walked in. What do I do for a living? Am I a Catholic? Where do I live? And since I live with my dad, am I going to move? And finally, what do I think about children? I'm just glad they didn't ask if I had my own teeth or check them, because at that point I would have screamed. I warned you, Regina said as we walked out to my car. I didn't think there would be so many people. My parents, my older brothers, my grandmother, and my aunts all asked questions when I told them who I was going to date. My family is very caring. But should your father have taken my fingerprints? We both laughed at this. We had a good date. It was a little tense at times due to our brief fiery history, including more than a bit of luggage we were both lugging around. Her ex-boyfriend got her pregnant and ran away when he found out. As far as she knew, he had returned to Puerto Rico, where they both came from. Regina immediately told me that her 3-year-old daughter Angela always comes first. Steve, how do you feel about dating a woman with a 3-year-old child? You have to understand that there will be no sleepovers, and it will never be just the two of us. I will always need to think about Angela when we plan something. It can be difficult, and if you don't want to continue, I would understand. Let's see how it goes day by day. I haven't been around kids much, so this will be a new experience for me, but I don't get scared that easily. They kicked us out of the restaurant at 11. As I was driving her home, she asked me to stop in a parking lot about a half-mile from her house. She unbuckled her belt, moved over to me, and kissed me so hard that the soles of my shoes melted, not to mention made me horny. After 3 additional kisses, she returned to her seat, buckled her belt, and straightened her hair. I sat there looking surprised but pleased. Did you really think that I would let you kiss me standing at the door of my house or on the threshold in front of everyone? Besides, I wanted to see what you were capable of without pressure. Now drive, I need to get home before they send a search party after me. When we arrived at her house, I opened the car door for her, walked her to the front door, and was rewarded with a kiss on the lips. From the corner of my eye, I saw shadows moving from window to window inside the house. They can't be that protective, I thought to myself as I walked back to the car. She's not a child. She has a daughter, damn it. I waved goodbye to her before getting into the car and driving away. Okay, I knew it was stupid, and I probably would have been able to get away if someone in her family hadn't seen me driving past the church on Saturday night. They waved at me, I waved back, and then I felt my stomach clench. Damn, I said under my breath. Were you following me? Regina screamed into the phone. Her loud, harsh words echoed in my head. It's not what you think. I just wanted to see what you were doing. It sounded as stupid as if she had said I was passing by. Then why didn't you come in? Would you believe that I felt a little intimidated by your family? It wasn't a lie. Steve, I come from a big, close, Catholic family, and we all care and help each other. It's probably not that different from your family. She clearly didn't know what she was talking about. Regina, let's just say that my upbringing was different from yours and keep it to ourselves. Look, if I embarrassed you in any way, I sincerely apologize. You didn't disgrace me. I just think you have some serious trust issues that we'll have to deal with if I decide to date you again. I'm not going to lie to you, and the sooner you realize that, the better. However, I won't tolerate you following me or stalking me. Understand? So if you want to act like a normal person, then we can meet again. If not, don't call me again. There was no doubt that she had laid all her cards on the table. Sorry, it won't happen again. How about I make it up to you this Saturday? You're free, right? You're lucky. There's nothing on my calendar yet. Great, sign me up. This time, the choice of restaurant is yours. I'm not a racist, really, but I felt more than uncomfortable in the restaurant that Regina chose. It was a nice place, the food was fantastic, but from the moment we walked through the front door, all eyes were on me as if I had come from another planet. I felt as if I was at an exhibition. This is my favorite restaurant in the whole world. They make everything from scratch and the portions are killer. She was right about that because I couldn't even finish my plate. If I close my eyes and take a deep breath, I can imagine that I am back home in Puerto Rico, in my grandmother's kitchen, sitting at her big wooden table. Regina smiled, but looking at several other tables, the guys there didn't look happy. You could say that I was trespassing on their territory. Then it began. It started with an innocent question. Unfortunately, my answer opened a chapter in my life that I had tried to keep closed. Steve, when you look back, what is your most vivid childhood memory? Like I said, it was an innocent question, and I think she was expecting some cute story about my mom baking cookies for me, something sweet and innocent, but that's not what I said. Mom, who slapped me in the face when I tried to stop her from leaving Daddy and me. I said this in a low monotone voice with an indifferent face. Well, that definitely wiped the smile off her face. What followed was a conversation I only had with Jeremy and my grandmother. I tried not to let my anger take over, but my trembling voice became louder and louder. Regina finally thought it would be better if we continued this conversation somewhere else. I paid the bill, and we continued talking in the front seat of my car for the next 2 hours. It brought me back to my own personal hell. I didn't tell her everything. I only gave her enough highlights for her to understand why I am the way I am, including my closeness with Jeremy. Steve, not all women are like your mother. Some are, but most are not. And not all women are out to deceive you, believe me. I wanted to believe her, but damn, it was hard. We started dating and seeing each other at least once a week for the next 3.5 months. Our families were complete opposites, and although I resented some of their views and what I thought were two personal issues, they finally decided that I was probably harmless and relaxed their guard, not completely, but a little. I was happy, Regina was happy, even Angela seemed happy to go with the flow, although she remained a little reserved in my presence. When I went to Regina's Sunday family dinners, it was fun, educational, and a little stressful at the same time, just because I was sure that all eyes were on me all the time. Relax, you're the new attraction of the month. When my cousin Carla brought her boyfriend to church, no one left them alone until they knew all the details. Steve, women are naturally curious, unlike men, and they want to know everything juicy details. I felt a little better, barely. My family never went to church, but I was expected to accompany them every Sunday. Her family still wasn't entirely sure of me, and I wasn't entirely sure of them. This whole family affair was new and unfamiliar to me. When I said Regina was hot, I wasn't lying. I loved that I could look her straight in the eyes when I kissed her, and that I could hug her tightly without the fear of breaking her. She was a fantastic kisser, with a body I wanted to explore, but she wasn't ready to share just yet, at least not yet. After my hand was pushed away more than a few times, we had a serious conversation. I really like Steve. You know my past, so I hope you'll understand why I'm not ready for the next step yet. I know you're a little disappointed, she said, smiling slyly. But think about it, how awesome will it be when we actually do it? You could say I was blue with frustration. I told her I understood and would wait until she was ready, although not without some irritation. Then the day came when one of my hidden flaws showed itself in all its glory. Whether it was due to insecurity, jealousy, or simply not wanting anyone to touch my girlfriend, our next round of discussions deeply affected our relationship. The fact is that Regina loved to dance, not just loved to dance, but loved to dance. As I mentioned, I was no Fred Astaire, and although I liked to dance, I preferred slow dancing when she was in my arms. Because I kept saying no when she asked me to, I stupidly told her to go have fun when she asked if I minded if she danced with other guys. Huge mistake. Now, week after week, I was forced to watch from the sidelines as she danced whatever she wanted with anyone who invited her. To paraphrase the last statement, with every Emilio, Marcos, or Roberto. Some were old friends, some new, and the rest, well, who knows? I just think they just wanted a piece of her attention. It was wearing me down. We had a little fight, especially after I told her that I didn't like the way she danced with everyone who asked her. I tried to explain that I didn't like what she was doing. I wanted her to sit with me and listen to music. She laughed and said that it was a dance club for a reason, and that I shouldn't worry about her doing every senior dance with me. I let her know that her dismissive attitude did not amuse me. Or rather we, left it alone that night, but I knew it wasn't over yet. We were on a double date with Jeremy and Cindy at one of our favorite clubs. Jeremy, like me, only lasted a couple of songs, and then the girls went off to have fun. Cindy returned after about half a dozen dances, but there was no sign of Regina. Half an hour later, when Regina was still not there, I went to look for her. She was dancing, if you could call it dancing, to salsa. She looked amazing, but that guy had his hands in places I couldn't get without a spanking, even after 3 months. When that song ended, the next one started, and I never had a chance to intervene. I waited for the end of this song and interjected. When the music ended, I was the most embarrassed guy on the floor. Okay, I'm not a good dancer, but Regina danced around me, emphasizing what I already knew, and now everyone else knew it. Then she did the unforgivable, she laughed at me. Whether it was the way I moved or I just looked funny didn't matter. The final blow came when another friend of hers took her away to dance as the music started again, leaving me alone on the dance floor with everyone dancing around me. The only word I can use to describe my feelings at that moment was humiliated. I watched her move easily across the floor with her new partner. When I got back to our table, I was furious. My patience has run out. I downed 2 beers as I watched Regina move from one guy to the next. However, one guy in particular was paying too much attention to her on the dance floor. My irritation was growing, and the beer I was drinking was not helping me at all to control it. "Steve, relax, it's just dancing," Cindy said, watching the top of my head explode, seeing this guy kiss Regina on the lips as the music stopped. I almost made it to the dance floor before the music started again, but it didn't. She and her new partner disappeared somewhere in the crowd. "I don't need this," I muttered, returning to the table. I put down my beer, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. "Steve," Cindy called out to me, but I didn't turn around. Jeremy followed me outside. "You know this will piss her off, right?" he said outside the club. "I see your point, and she may have really gone overboard tonight, but getting angry and walking away, leaving her here, won't solve the problem. Besides, you're already half drunk and shouldn't be driving. Go back, calm down. At least take a taxi home. If I stay here any longer, she definitely won't like what I have to say when she finally decides to grace me with her presence. You can take her home unless she decides to go off with one of her many dance partners." I don't think anyone could convince me to stay. I felt like everyone in the club was laughing at me because of the way Regina acted and treated me. She came with me, didn't she? Drunk driving was absolutely stupid. As I staggered through the front door, my father looked at me and told me everything he thought about it. "If I even think you're driving drunk again, I'll call the police on you myself. I don't care if you kill yourself, I care about the poor guy you might take with you." I tried to explain why this happened, but he said he didn't care. "If you can't keep your girlfriend, it's your own fault." That's when the 5 beers I drank tonight got me into a lot of trouble. "What happened to you and Mom? Did she find someone better?" I knew as soon as I said it that I had crossed the line. I could think about this for years. It's just that I've never been stupid enough to say it out loud before. I didn't see the impact, but I definitely felt it. I feel like a sack of potatoes. "You don't know a damn thing, do you hear?" he shouted at me. "Your mother was a damn cheater and still is. I treated that woman like a queen, and she betrayed me time and time again. You're just as ungrateful as she is, and I want you to get your ass out of my way. Home by next week. Can you hear me?" I heard. but it didn't reach me because I was too drunk and trying to clear my thoughts. My father left, leaving me lying on the kitchen floor. Life at that moment did not look rosy. When you're stuck, it's hard to listen to sound advice, even if you know it's the right thing to do. I found a small apartment close to work and took Wednesday off to move. My father didn't talk to me, but Regina, well, she didn't call either. She was probably as mad at me as I was at her about that Saturday night. Jeremy helped me move my things from my dad's house on Wednesday evening. Before leaving, I took my house and garage keys off my ring and left them on the kitchen counter. Now I really don't have a family. Give him a couple of days, he'll come to his senses, Jeremy said. But I knew that this could be a real point of no return. When he didn't respond to any of my messages after 3 weeks, I almost resigned myself to it. After this, Regina and I had a serious fight over her behavior and how I perceived her lack of respect for me that Saturday night. She finally told me to go to hell. Life really wasn't looking good at that point, and it was on the verge of getting worse. I was alone, and for the first time, I didn't have to answer to anyone other than myself and maybe my new boss. Cindy thought I was being a complete jerk to everyone. When I told her to fuck off, Jeremy and I had our first fight in 20 years. He was upset that I had put him in a difficult position, and although he understood my feelings, he was in love with Cindy. I made the choice easier for him. I stopped calling him too. I started hanging out with the new group from work. It was a mix of women and men who loved to party, especially on weekends. I forced myself to get on the dance floor, and by doing so, I think my skin became an inch thicker. I no longer cared what people thought about me on and off the dance floor, and perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt more confident. I saw her dance with many guys. She knew I was there because I caught her looking at me several times. I danced more than usual, especially when the slow songs were playing. We were playing a stupid game, and we both knew it. I just didn't know which of us would be the first to get to the next level. I didn't see her come because my back was to the dance floor, but everyone else at our table did. "Steve, do you want to dance?" she asked without showing a hint of a smile or any warmth. "Regina, didn't you humiliate me enough last time, or do you just want to show everyone how much better you are at dancing than me? I'm sure you can find much better partners. You've never had a problem with that before." "You really are a jerk, you know," she said. "And just for your information, it's not what you think." I could see her group of friends watching us, one guy in particular. "Thanks for the invitation, but no thanks. I don't want your new boyfriend to think I'm invading his territory." I'm not sure what I saw in her eyes, but there was pure anger on her face as she turned and walked back to her friends. I was getting more and more tired of this whole club scene. I liked the music, but the crowds, the smoke, and the pressure I put on myself to be someone I wasn't made it less enjoyable every time. I watched him walk towards our table, but it wasn't unusual. It was the guy from Regina's table who glared at me, but with the bar right behind me, I assumed he was heading there. He didn't look angry, he wasn't a thug, he didn't even look at me. Looking back, I should have been wary, but damn, it's a dance club. One of the last things I remember was him pulling something shiny out of his jacket pocket with his right hand. He didn't say a word when he approached me, he didn't plan to. The pain in my stomach was sharp and intense. Acting on instinct, I pushed him away and saw that he had a knife in his hand. I think at that moment I was in shock. Someone at my table screamed and, holding my insides in both hands, I fell to my knees, then collapsed face down on the dirty floor. I was told that the place had turned into complete chaos. My table threw bottles at the guy, not wanting him to come near me again. They saw him try to run away before a guard grabbed him. Never attempt to attack a 6'6", 350-pound security guard, even if you have a pocket knife. Someone said the guard almost tore his arm off. As for me, I lay on the floor for no more than 5 minutes before I was placed on a stretcher, carried out, and loaded into a waiting ambulance. I had no idea what happened because I lost consciousness. Even after I came to the hospital, I was still not sure what had happened. The room was dark, and when I first opened my eyes, I thought I was going blind. As I began to focus, I was grateful until I felt pain. Then everything came back to me. At least I was alive. How the hell do they in the hospital know when someone is waking up? Magic. Within seconds, I had a nurse checking my vital signs and asking how I was feeling. I was stabbed to death. How did she think I should feel? Some questions don't even deserve an answer. She said I was lucky and would have to stay in the hospital for a couple more days, but after that I would probably be discharged. I wanted to know about the guy who decided to explore my morning in my stomach. She informed me that 2 police officers at my door would answer all my questions. These were the usual questions I saw on most cop shows. Do I know him? Have I seen him before? Did he tell me anything before he did this? And lastly, and most importantly, why? I think he was angry at me because of a fight with my ex-girlfriend. I gave them the nickel version. And all this because I dance like an awkward white boy. I'll have to take lessons when I get out of here, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. They didn't laugh and didn't see the humor in it, and neither did I. Your assailant is currently in custody, charged with assault with a deadly weapon. When we look at the facts, the charge may be upgraded to attempted murder. I liked the word attempt. I finished my testimony, signed it, and they left, saying they would contact us. I must have fallen asleep again. The next time I woke up, the room was dark. You didn't have to go to such extremes to get me to talk to you, said a voice from the darkness. My father got up from the chair in the corner of the room and sat down on the chair next to my bed. I'm so sorry, I started to say before he stopped me. We'll talk later when you leave here. I called your boss at home, said he already knew about it. He told me to tell you not to worry about your job and just get better. The doctor said you'll be sick for a while, but nothing vital has been cut. You're damn lucky. You've lost a lot of blood. Luckily, a couple of your friends applied a wet compress to make sure you didn't bleed out before the paramedics arrived. I think you'll have to pick up a few dry cleaning bills and maybe buy someone a dress that was used for a poultice. In any case, you are alive and well. Maybe next time you will. I'll learn to keep my mouth shut and get my head out of my ass. My father always had a way with words. At that moment, the doctor entered my room. Good evening, Mr. Moore. How are you feeling? He asked, looking at my card. Son, I need to go and make some more calls. I'll catch up with you later. My father began to leave my room, so I called out to him. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. Get some rest, and I'll see you soon. The doctor started again. You are lucky. As I told your father and your wife, an inch more in either direction, we would have had serious complications. Sorry, doctor. Did you say my father and my wife? Your wife came with you in an ambulance. Steve, you probably don't remember. You were almost out of your mind. My wife? I repeated to myself. I will leave you alone for a couple of weeks while you piss off some local bandits. I think I'll get you a Kevlar vest for Christmas, so maybe I won't have to come down to the hospital in the middle of the night to attack you, and you don't even want to hear what Cindy said. Jeremy smiled. Well, now that we got that out of the way, bro, how are you feeling? It's just wonderful. Now at least I know what it's like to have a barbecue. We laughed. We apologized to each other and exchanged news. So you got married, does she know? Very funny. But I only know one girl who has the courage to do that. I thought you two broke up. We broke up, or so I thought. When she asked me to dance and I refused, she was offended. That's when her friend decided to cut me a little. Well, you'll be out of here soon. Think about the story you'll tell your kids someday. And if you're lucky, you'll have a nice scar. Women love that. It'll be like, oh, poor Steve, right? To your bedroom, you maybe wanted more than you could have dreamed. I doubted it. Jeremy stayed for another 20 minutes before saying something about dinner and the need to get some sleep before work tomorrow. Right before he left, he warned me about his next visit. I'll bring Cindy with me tomorrow night. She says she has some tough words for you. God save me. That's what I need, another woman who will come at me. I asked him to wait until I was out of here before bringing Cindy. I hope to be home by Wednesday evening. If, of course, I survive all these visits. The doctor returned straight from a not-so-successful lunch at the hospital, announcing that I was doing as well as could be expected and that I would see him tomorrow. I slept great Sunday night, better than I have slept in months. It's probably because of all these medications. I'm sure I visited a couple of times during the night, but I didn't notice. I woke up hungry, happy, and if it weren't for the stitches on my stomach, I would have happily taken a walk in the park. By Wednesday afternoon, I was home, bored and ready to go back to work. Just don't overdo it, were the only instructions the doctor left me. I had my last follow-up appointment a week later, and then I was left to my own devices. On my first day back at work, there were cards and cookies on my desk. I was the center of attention for the first 2 hours. Once everyone's curiosity was satisfied, everything returned to normal, except for a few last-minute congratulations from colleagues who sometimes stopped by to see me. I left 3 emails and 2 calls to Regina to thank her for her help, but there was no response. When Cindy came in the next evening and lectured me for the umpteenth time, she said that she had spoken to Regina. She regrets what happened and feels guilty. After your argument, she went back to her friends and basically told them what an ass you were to her. One of the guys she only met once took it as a sign that you didn't respect her and decided to teach you some manners, as he put it. Manners, the son of a bitch almost killed me. She has good friends. Steve, Regina said that even though she didn't know the guy, she still feels partly guilty. And I should. After all this, you don't understand anything. You're an idiot. She loves you. Why? I have no idea. You got it out of pride. Maybe she didn't pay enough attention to you, but weren't you the one who told her to dance with all these guys? Because why are you so bad on the dance floor? Dancing with them, yes, but she let them touch her. That's not dancing. That's harassment. Have you talked to her about this? No, you just got angry and left. How was she supposed to know? With your short temper and hers too, you both will have to learn to talk and not yell at each other. Steve, girls are smart, but we don't read thoughts. Call her and explain in a calm, quiet voice why you were angry. I know she will listen to you. Tried, but she won't pick up her phone or answer my emails. I think it's time to move on. What, the 4th, 5th, or maybe 6th time? When will you finally understand that one day you have to take a risk for someone? People aren't perfect. We all make mistakes, including you. If you want to be alone for the rest of your life, just keep walking away every time life challenges you or you start to feel uncomfortable, take a chance, and maybe, just maybe, you won't be disappointed. Cindy, you may not have heard, but she's not answering her phone. Steve, you're not disabled, are you? And if I'm not mistaken, you still have a car and know where she lives. Pull yourself together and show that you have courage. I tried on Friday and Saturday without much success. At one moment, I thought that she had picked up the phone, but a second later, I heard a familiar dial tone. I followed Cindy's advice. St. Paul Catholic Church holds 5 services on Sunday. I knew she wouldn't be at the services at 7 or 8 in the morning because of Angela, which left me with 9:15, 10:30, and noon. I positioned myself on the steps of the church and waited. I didn't get anywhere at the 9:15 service, but I was lucky when I saw Regina and her whole family approaching the curb 10 minutes after 10. I thought through in my head what I wanted to say, but when I saw her, I forgot 90%. She saw me and looked at her family. It didn't look good. She didn't even say hello to me. She just walked past me and went into the church. I followed her, sitting on a bench 4 rows behind her. My family never went to Mass. Hell, before I met Regina, I had only seen the interior of a church at weddings and funerals. When I walked with her, I did what everyone else did. He stood up, knelt, and sat down when everyone else did. Today, the old woman next to me gave me a prayer book and showed me which page we were on. She smiled at me and went back to reading her chant. Even with my head down, I knew she saw me as she walked back down the aisle after receiving her prosphora, or whatever they were handing out at the altar. 15 minutes later, the service ended and everyone began to leave the church. I lost track of her a couple of times because of the crowd where everyone was talking to each other. I caught up with her when she was already halfway down the stairs. Regina, she stopped. Damn, everyone stopped. Steve, what do you need? I just need to talk to you. Didn't you say enough last time? Please just give me 10 minutes. That's all I ask, and after that I'll leave you alone if you want. It was difficult to tell from her face what she was thinking. Her mother whispered something in her ear, then looked at me. Okay, I'm not going to discuss this in front of everyone, Regina said. I followed her to her car. Do you still remember where I live? I nodded yes. Follow me, and we can talk there. I did as I was told, even though I didn't like the idea of having this conversation in front of the whole family. Mom, I'll be out in the backyard for a bit. Make sure Angela stays inside, okay? Is Steve staying for lunch? Regina looked at me. We'll decide soon. She left the house through the back door, and I followed her. We walked into the backyard, and while we wanted to believe that we had gotten away from all the prying eyes, that sure as hell didn't happen. Okay, speak. You have 10 minutes, she said with displeasure, crossing her arms over her chest. Sorry, I guess I'm taking up too much of your precious time, I said, turning to leave. I've been bossed around all my life, and I'm already tired of it. I guess we really don't have anything to talk about. Damn it, Steve, just talk to me. I don't understand what happened between us. Everything was fine, and then you suddenly disappeared. I spent the next 15 minutes explaining to Regina why I was so angry with her. You didn't say a word to me. Why? I tried, or at least tried to do it a couple of times. Didn't you see how angry I was that night? Damn, I was supposed to be beet red and steaming from my ears, but you just ignored me. Steve, I may have ignored you a little, but it was never intentional, believe me. The next time I saw you, I told you that I felt humiliated on the dance floor. I became the laughing stock of all your friends. I paid special attention to the last words. These guys were hugging you, and you didn't do anything to stop them. And when the music stopped, I saw your last partner kiss you, and then I lost my patience. You should have been with me, not with them. I was with you. No, Regina, you weren't. Cindy returned to the table half an hour later, back to Jeremy. After another half hour, I had to physically look for you, and you still didn't come back. If I wanted to be treated like crap, I would have stayed with one of my ex-girlfriends. I thought you were different. After this statement, there was deep silence. But I want to thank you for what you did that night. Without your skirt, I might have bled to death. This is where the tears began, hers, not mine. I'm sorry. Never in my life could I imagine that he would do what he did. The only thing that came to my mind was to stop the bleeding. That's when I used my skirt. Someone poured beer on it, saying that alcohol would prevent infection. We looked at each other and laughed at this statement. After a few seconds, she continued, Hey, what do I know? Thinking back, it was a little chaotic back then, but it worked, didn't it? I guess I owe you a skirt. By the way, how did we end up married from the moment we talked until they put me in the ambulance? They weren't going to let me in, so I just said we were married, she replied casually. One of the orderlies gave me a blanket to cover me with, and we drove off. I didn't have the answers to all their questions, so I took out your wallet and gave them your medical records. Then I saw a card with a list of phone numbers and called your father. I met him at the entrance to the emergency room and told him everything I knew. You were already in surgery, so we just waited together. When the doctor came out and asked Mrs. Moore, your father, and I looked at each other. That you will be fine, but you need to stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. After he left, your father and I talked a little. He told me to go home and that he would call me as soon as he saw you. But you never called back. I thought you just wanted to yell at me some more. I felt bad enough as it was. I'm sorry, I never meant to offend you. Now we were holding hands, looking at each other, but not saying anything. Regina, honey, lunch is on the table, her mother shouted from the back door. Are you hungry? She asked. No to food, I replied, kissing her. We had lunch with her whole family. After lunch, we took Angela and went to the park. While Angela played, we set the rules for the future. No more quarrels, or rather, no more avoiding quarrels. If we have problems with each other, they must be resolved immediately. When we go out together, we are together unless we both agree to do otherwise. Dancing is one thing, but being touched and kissed on the dance floor is something else entirely. The next 2 points will be the most difficult for me. Steve, you need to trust me if we have any chance of anything real. You have to trust that I always put your interests first and will never, I repeat, never cheat on you. But you have to promise to do it because there's something about me that you might not like. I felt a little uneasy. You need to make peace with your father and your mother. You can see them together or separately, but it must be done. I couldn't believe she was asking me this. Hell no, no way in the world. I have no problems with my father. We've already talked and everything is fine between us. But my mother is a completely different story. I don't even know where she lives now. It shouldn't be too hard to find out. You're smart, you know how to use a computer, and you still remember her last name. How hard can it be? What's the point? I haven't seen or spoken to her in years. I have absolutely no desire to see her again. These two made you who you are today, and you need to face, or rather talk to both. There are too many unresolved issues and open wounds. You are no longer that little 5-year-old boy, and you need to close this chapter of your life forever. Forgive them and move on with your life, which I hope will include Angela and me. She asked a lot, but I knew she was right about it. Regina didn't want to be there, but I insisted. For better or worse, if we were going to move forward together, I wanted her to meet the two people responsible for who I became. It took a week to meet my father and my mother. I wanted to see them together. First, I didn't want to go through this more than once, and second, I didn't think anything could be resolved unless they also made peace with each other. He finally agreed, but only under his own conditions and only if it happened at his home, something related to his home territory. And my mother, she agreed almost immediately, something about how she wanted to see me again. So on Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we all gathered in my father's living room. The tension could be cut with a knife. My father rearranged the furniture in the living room so that everyone was sitting in a large circle around a large coffee table. This way, everyone could see everyone without being close enough to touch anyone. Before we started, I introduced Regina to my mother. My father already knew her, as he had met her that night in the hospital. I told them that it was my idea to have her here and that her presence and support were important to me. After the greetings, I began. I know this is hard for everyone, but it's long overdue. Everyone seemed busy with their drinks or shifting nervously in place. We may not love each other, but we all have a common denominator, me. Mom, Dad, I don't know what happened between you, and I don't care at this point. But your actions have left scars on a 5-year-old boy in ways that you can't even imagine. I turned to my father. Dad, telling me to get yourself together and be a man may have worked for you, but I went from living in what I thought was a happy home to living with a tough father and an overprotective grandmother. The only thing you taught me was to keep watch, because there will always be someone who wants to deceive me. Until recently, I believed you until I met someone who truly has my interests first. I squeezed Regina's hand. Then it was my mom's turn. Mom, what you did to Daddy and me was unforgivable. You can't abandon your child. If you and Daddy had problems, it was your problem. I see that you thought the only way out was to leave, but the way you left broke my heart. You are my mother. You should have loved me and not left me. All those promises that we would be together again were like a teaser with candy that you gave to try and then took away. It got to the point where I felt like you didn't want to see me anymore. You were building your new life without my participation. How many years has it been since you last talked to me? 6, 7. How many calls, cards, and did you miss birthdays? And why? Don't you care about me anymore? Or are you just ashamed that you let it drag on for so long? Tears flowed as my mother tried, but couldn't get the words out, so I continued. No matter what, you are still my mother, and nothing can change that. But how present you will be in my life depends on what happens here today. You both need to understand one thing. I no longer need your support or approval. We're all getting older, and one day I'll get married and maybe have kids. I want you both to be a part of our lives, and I hope you want that too." This started a round table discussion. For the next hour, the phrase, "I'm sorry," was repeated constantly. My father spoke rather than shouted at my mother for the first time since she left us. They were never going to get back together or even be friends, but if they could at least remain civil to each other, I could live with it. For the first time, I learned that my mother had remarried and was happy, but would give anything to have me back in her life. My father was still resentful when he started bringing up old problems. I stopped it immediately. "Dad, this is about us, or should I say the three of us, not about you and Mom. If you want to fight again, please wait until Regina and I leave, then you can destroy the house if you want." I took back control. When things quieted down again, I let Regina tell them a little about herself. She explained to them about our volatile relationship, adding that she was committed to the relationship. She told them that this discussion was important if the relationship was to truly blossom. In the 2 hours we spoke, problems were resolved and meetings were scheduled, especially during the holidays. Although complete peace was not established, at least the hatchet was not buried in someone's head this time. We all hugged, exhausted and emotionally drained, but with smiles, we ended the meeting. Returning to Regina's parents' house, she shared with me her feelings about what had just happened at my father's. "Stephen Moore, I'm so proud of you. You are a strong, wonderful, caring man, and I'm so glad we're together." "How happy are you?" I said with a sly smile. "Let's go. We don't have time for what you're thinking. Remember, you promised Angeli that we'd take her shopping and eat out if she behaved. I'd rather her mother be a bad girl and be in my bed right now." She did not give in to provocation. "We'll have time for that, but later." I pouted, even though I knew it wouldn't lead to anything. Regina's mom's eyes wanted to know everything as we walked through the front door, but she kept her mouth shut. I thought he and Regina would talk later. We picked up Angela, and within 5 minutes, we were at the mall. Regina and I each picked out an outfit for Angela. Personally, I thought my choice suited her much better. I paid for both outfits and dinner at Pizza Hut. It had been a long day for all of us, and we were all pretty tired. After Regina put Angela to bed, we sat in her backyard, cuddling and secretly kissing when no one was looking. At 9 o'clock, after a very pleasant kiss, I decided it was time to go home. "I want to go to work at 19:15, so be here no later than 8:15, she announced, walking me to my car. With one more kiss, I headed home for a well-deserved nap. "Where's Angela?" I asked the next morning. "She's going with my mom to Mass at 10:30. It'll be just the two of us this morning." Everyone knew each other. It was more like a social gathering outside a large Catholic church, with everyone updating the others on the week's events. I wasn't a regular participant, but I could tell that everyone knew who I was, probably knowing more than I would have liked. The same thing happened on the way out. Saying goodbye to everyone and saying, "We'll see you next week," took us at least 15 minutes. With Regina next to me in the front seat, she announced that she wanted to sit next to me in the front seat. Regina announced that she wanted to stop at one of the local bakeries. She chose a couple of dishes which we both liked and bought each of us a cappuccino. "If you don't mind, I'd like to have breakfast at your apartment for a change." Was I against it? Of course not. I lived for the time when I could take her entirely into my own hands, which did not happen often. It was nice to sip my coffee and enjoy the warmth of a beautiful summer Sunday morning during the 10-minute drive to my house. I felt relaxed. Hand in hand, we entered my apartment. Hands, lips, and tongues are what greeted me when I turned around after closing the door. There were no discussions, no idle talk, or anything like that. Regina had her own plans this morning, and it wasn't breakfast. I was just grateful that my bedroom wasn't as messy as usual. That morning breakfast was delayed by about 2 hours. Do you know what it's like to hold a curvy woman in your arms? Wonderful. Full breasts, hips, an ass that could take a beating, and a mouth that made me forget every other lover I'd ever had. I expected this to happen sooner rather than later, but after yesterday, I thought we'd talk again this morning, working out the rest of our problems. I don't think there were any pressing issues to deal with this morning. Maybe it was my insecurities, but I wanted to prove to her that I was the best lover she had ever had. That was great, it felt really good, she said, licking my lips and then inhaling them. Good, great, I thought to myself, thinking I had given my best effort and it was just good. I think I at least gave it an excellent, or maybe even a wonderful rating. It seems to me that nice is not suitable now. My male ego took a hit, and I think Regina understood my dilemma. It was the most pleasant and tender lovemaking I have ever experienced. I need a shower, and so do you. We can't go back to my mom smelling like sex, can we? I don't know why we don't try it and see what happens. Let's see, a close-knit, overprotective, and extremely traditional Catholic family on one hand, and a guy they're just starting to trust who brings their daughter home from church and smells like they've been having sex all night, died before you got back to your car. Regina, they know you're not a virgin. They probably realize that you are at least a little involved in this. Steve, thinking about it and throwing it in their face are two completely different scenarios. If they don't see it, they don't worry about it. They trust their daughter. After eating breakfast, sex, of course, whets the appetite, we headed to Regina's house. I held the car door open for her. She sat down, adjusted her seat belt, tousled her hair, and was looking in the vanity mirror, putting on her lipstick, when I walked over, kissed her, and just before starting the car, I started to complicate things even more. Without thinking twice, I casually declared, "I love you." Just as casually, I started the car and started to pull out of the parking lot when she screamed, "Stop." She leaned over and turned off my car. "What the hell did you just tell me?" I unbuckled my seat belt, extended my hand to a surprised Regina, kissed her on the lips, and told her again that I loved her. I restarted the car and drove away a second time. "Steve, we need to talk about this." "I know, but is now the right time or place?" "Well, my parents' house sure as hell isn't the place." "Just answer me one question. Do you care about me?" "Yes, but," she started to say when I stopped her. "There are no buts. I care about you, you care about me, what else matters?" "Well, I can think of one person that immediately comes to mind. Regina, you and Angela are one. I've known this from day one, and you didn't see me heading for the mountains, did you? There will probably be many problems, but together we will solve them. One at a time, if we love each other, the rest is just unnecessary nonsense." She didn't quite agree with me, because now she was somewhere up there in the clouds. "We need to talk, but not at Mom's house. I still don't know where you want to put this, and your ideas and mine may not coincide." "Well, we could turn around and head back to my place. Just warning you, once I get you back inside, I'll have other things on my mind." Just like a guy, give him a try and he'll want to make a sustainable diet out of it. We looked at each other and laughed. "Just go. Mom is waiting for us for lunch." Lunch was good as always, and as always, they kept pushing food on me and then looked disappointed when I refused it. "How will you gain weight if you don't eat, your skin and bones?" her mother said, putting this or that on my plate. Regina couldn't take her eyes off me, especially when I was talking to her mother, then to her grandmother. When I let my hands wander, she nudged me with her elbow. Her eyes said that her family was watching. "Want to give them a show they won't soon forget," I whispered in her ear. The look I received in response said, "No way in the world." I kept my hands to myself. Regina's grandmother sat on my other side. She probably looked at least 80, but she could have been 90, I don't know for sure. She was active, but thin and looked old. During dessert, she leaned towards me and pointed at my plate. "Do you like it?" she asked, referring to dessert. "Yes, very tasty," I said, trying to be especially polite. "I prepared it," she replied, standing up proudly. This was followed by another statement. "My granddaughter is a beautiful woman, isn't she?" "Yes, she is," I answered, turning to Regina, who was talking to someone on the other side of the table. since you're sleeping together, isn't it time for you to get married?" With these words, she stuffed the last spoonful of her dessert into her mouth. I almost choked, grabbing the tea to swallow what was left in my mouth. My thoughts were racing. How could she know? Hell, we just did this for the first time this morning. What is she, a witch? As Grandma swallowed the remainder in her mouth, she continued where she left off. "The way you look at each other reminds me of my late husband. He never got enough. This man could do this for hours. How I did anything at all when he was around is still a mystery to me." I looked at Regina and silently said the word, "help," hoping that she would understand my hint. "Well, I hope it happens soon. I'm not getting any younger, you know, and I wouldn't want to die before then." With these words, she patted my hand. I was very happy when Regina came to my rescue. "Grandma, I need to introduce Steve to Aunt Claire before she leaves." "No problem, honey. Steve and I are just getting to know each other a little better." When my grandmother's gaze met mine, it said everything. "You didn't tell anyone that we had sex before we came here, did you?" "Steve, do you think I'm crazy? I'm damn sure I don't have a death wish, aren't you?" "Well, your grandmother said that since we are having sex, I should make you an honest woman." This along with a brief history of her sex life with your grandfather. Damn, too much information. Regina was laughing into her hands now. "Come on, laugh. You saw that I almost choked on the custard. Think how cute it would be if she fed me mouth to mouth. Ugh. The only one who will give you word of mouth is me." With a quick glance to make sure no one was watching, she kissed me hard. It was a little creepy, but every Sunday my grandmother would not take her eyes off me, especially if I was with Angela or Regina. My conversations with Regina became more serious and included all topics, including Angela. Would I adopt her if we got married? Would I become a Catholic? Where would we live? How many children did I want? She wanted answers to all these questions, but sometimes I didn't have them. Things were moving fast, and it scared the hell out of me. We often met twice with Jeremy and his wife Cindy. Last year they took the plunge and were wondering why I was delaying. My family is closer than it has been in years. I made it a point to talk to my father and mother weekly. We worked on our relationship, but sometimes it felt like pulling teeth. It was difficult to regain so much lost time in a few months, but I was going to shake things up again. This happened on Sunday, the 14th of March. Regina and I were as compatible as anyone I've ever met. The work was going great, and for once I was happy with my life. The lease was expiring on the 1st of May, and I had already told them that I was not going to renew. Instead of replacing my 10-year-old car, I rebuilt the engine and did a few other things so it would last another 100,000 miles. I had better things to do with my money. Often on Sundays after church, there would be 20 to 25 plus people at her mother's house. It was lunch, and everyone brought something for lunch. Regina and I went to the bakery after church and bought 4 loaves of freshly baked Cuban bread. They were still warm when we put them in the back seat next to Angela. In the trunk of my car was a large cooler with ice and a few other items that I would need later. When we entered the house, Regina went to the kitchen and I went to look for her grandmother. It was quite difficult. Luck was on my side because that Sunday she sat alone on the couch and watched what was happening. I walked over and sat down next to her. "Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling today?" She smiled and said that, except for a slight cough, she felt like she was 70 years old. "I need to show you something," I said, looking around for Regina and her mother. "This is something I bought for your granddaughter. I just want to know, do you think she'll like it?" I pulled the ring out of my top pocket and showed it to her. She didn't cry, didn't scream for joy or anything else. She just looked at him, smiled, nodded her head, and kissed me on the cheek. Placing her wrinkled hand on mine, she said, "She would really like it if it were the cigar ring you gave her." "So, have I received your blessing?" She didn't answer, only nodded again in approval. I kissed her forehead. My palms were sweaty, my heart was pounding. I had no appetite, but I managed to swallow a few bites. Regina sat on a bridge chair with a plate of food on her lap next to one of her aunts and her mother. They were all talking a mile a minute. I took one last sip of tea, relaxed my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked forward. I knew that if I hesitated, I would chicken out. I already chickened out once. Regina saw me walking towards her and smiled at me. I loved this woman more than anyone ever. She was about to say something to me when I fell to one knee in front of her. I had a big speech planned about how much I loved her and Angela, which would probably go on way too long. What happened was that I became a little tongue-tied and ended the conversation. Regina Diaz, I love you, and will you make me the happiest man on earth if you agree to become my wife? She didn't expect this, especially right here in her parents' living room, with no one but her father and grandmother. I was on my knees, holding that damn ring, and waited for probably an hour when she burst into tears, threw her arms around my neck, and kissed me. Everyone has gone crazy. I already did the right thing by asking Regina's hand from her father a week ago. When I walked in today, I handed him my car keys and told him that I had a cooler in the trunk of my car with a few bottles of champagne that we might need later. He took the keys, shook my hand, and said, "Good luck, because you're going to need this." He was right. The pandemonium began when every woman in the room wanted to see the ring that was already on her finger. And Regina, she didn't let me go one step for the next hour. The women were now all talking at the same time and loudly. When Angela entered the room to find out what was causing all the fuss, Regina grabbed her and told her that she was going to have a new dad. I think it went in one ear and came out the other, but I still got a hug from her. Looking at my grandmother, I saw her smile. It was a big day for her, too. Her father and brothers brought champagne. Glasses were filled, toasts were made, and I was officially welcomed into the family. While the women began planning the wedding, her father, brothers, and the rest of the men took me to the backyard, where they got strong drinks. I only lasted 3 rounds until I thought I was going to cough up a lung. They laughed and said I'd get used to it. This was the longest Sunday brunch I've ever been to. By 7 o'clock in the evening, everything began to calm down. Everyone congratulated us again as they walked out the front door. I was planning to leave soon, so I drank a glass of cold iced tea. I had already had too much to drink earlier and didn't want to risk getting a Dewey ticket that particular day. I watched as Regina helped her mother and grandmother, still with a smile on her glowing face. When she came to me, the kiss she gave me almost knocked me off my feet. I think now that we're engaged, she could show some affection in front of her family. "Why did you do this in front of my whole family?" she asked me when we were alone, and to top it off, she gave me another kiss. I thought about it for a long time. Considering how close your family is, I decided to include them in what I hoped would be one of the happiest moments of our lives together. It would be like us combining our two families. Well, it worked, and you sure impressed my parents, not to mention made a few guys in the room feel a little out of place. You always know how to surprise me. I'm trying. By the way, what would you do if I said no? Well, I know a mature lady, and if she's half as good as her stories, she'd probably kill me on our honeymoon. Asshole. I can guarantee you won't be able to walk when I'm done with you. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be telling you? We laughed. Sexual tension hung in the air. With Regina in my arms, I wanted to take her home and spend the next 2 hours showing her what we would do nonstop on our honeymoon. It seemed like her mother wasn't ready to let me go yet. First, she wanted to talk a little about the wedding. So for the next hour, me, Regina, her mother, grandmother, and her 2 aunts discussed the wedding. This is not at all how I planned to end my proposal day. On Monday and Tuesday evenings, we went around telling everyone the good news. We met first with my father, who was not at all surprised, and then with Jeremy and Cindy, who both said it was about time. I couldn't tell if my mom was surprised or not. Although she seemed genuinely happy for us, I felt something underlying. But I didn't care whether she liked it or not, it was already decided for us. When Regina asked when I wanted to get married, I said the sooner the better, because I needed to vacate my apartment by the end of April. We'll need to find a new apartment and be ready to move in the last week of April, so we don't have much time. Location was the main issue. She still wanted to be close to her parents, and I wanted to be close to work. We have a conflict. In the end, I placed her work, my work, and her parents' house on a map and drew a circle around all three. That's where we need to look. Her neighbor's second cousin's friend had a two-room apartment for rent. Apparently, marrying into a large, extended family has its benefits. The place was spacious, clean, and I could live with the terrible view of the parking lot for the price he offered us. We signed a one-year lease and were told we could move in any time after April 27th. After our first wedding meeting on the day of my proposal, I tried to stay away from wedding plans. I'll be there, tuxedo or not. As long as there is something to eat and drink there, I'll be happy. After all, this was the moment when the bride was supposed to shine. I thought they were joking when they said they had set the date for the first Saturday in May. I thought it would be impossible before June. Apparently, I underestimated the women of the Diaz family. 2 weeks in advance, the hall was booked and food arranged. The invitations had been ordered and were already being printed. I asked my mom if she wanted to add anything. In addition to her presence, she left the wedding organization to the family of my future wife. Not until our wedding night, I said a little too loudly when Regina told me her plan the following Saturday night. Think how excited you'll be by then, she explained, now a little hesitantly. Honey, you didn't say we couldn't do anything at all, right? I could think of at least 10 things at that point. Later that evening, we quietly tried at least 3. I may survive until the wedding. I could go on and on about our wedding, but let me just sum it up this way. When I saw my bride walking down the aisle with her father and mother, I knew at that moment that she was the most beautiful being on this blessed earth. I may be a little biased, but mere words cannot express how amazing she was, and she was soon to be mine. Secondly, there was enough food and drink to feed a small third-world country. Out of 128 guests, there were only 11 people on my side. On her side, the other 117 most brought something to eat or drink. I had never been to a potluck wedding before I knew it wouldn't be the last time. Finally, my mother and Regina planned our honeymoon without telling me or giving me a chance to intervene. Trust me, was all they said. It was nice as a wedding gift, but I wish I had some say in the matter. And the worst part was that she didn't tell me anything more than that I would like it as much as her family. It was scary. Well, maybe a little. Honey, how can I pack my suitcase if I don't know where we're going? Pack for very warm and humid weather. It did not help. But you'll need your nice suit and dancing shoes. Regina, I have a better idea. Why don't you and my mom collect for me? That way I'll make sure I have the right things. I said this in a sarcastic tone, but apparently she missed that part because the night before our wedding, the 2 largest suitcases I owned had tags with my name on them. I was in a quandary. It was almost midnight and the wedding was still going on. As much as I was having fun, I already had other ideas on my mind. I snuck up behind my bride, kissed her neck, and told her that she made me the happiest person on earth. She looked at her watch, called out to her mother, and told me it was time to change. Changing for what? For our honeymoon, silly. An hour later, the 4 of us were crammed into her father's Jeep with enough luggage for a trip around the world. With her mother and father in the front seats, Regina and I snuggled as close as possible to each other in the back seat. When we arrived at the airport 45 minutes later, I had had enough. As we pulled up to the edge of the road at the Southwest Terminal, I decided it was time to demand answers. I stopped and raised my hand to stop the whirlwind of events around me. Stop, wait, I won't take a step until you tell me where we're going. The 3 of them looked at each other. Finally, Regina answered my question. First to Puerto Rico, and we have a little over an hour and a half before our plane leaves. Well, at least I knew we were heading south. Already in our seats first class, no less a few minutes before takeoff, Regina handed me our itinerary for the next 7 days. We were treated to a 7-day cruise tour of the Southern Caribbean, starting in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her extended family met us at the airport, where we were taken to someone's house just outside of town. English was spoken here from time to time. The main language was Spanish. Introductions were made, and we were shown to a room where we could freshen up and get some rest. Relax or do whatever you want. The rest of the family will be coming around 11:30 in the morning for the party. Her cousin winked at us and closed the door. I turned to Regina with a big question mark on my face. The rest of the family? The party. My family here wants to throw us a wedding party. Family? How big is your family? Call me a coward, but my body has failed me. The hottest woman on the planet lay next to me on the bed, and I fell asleep on my wedding night. In my defense, it was 6 in the morning on Sunday, and I had been up for the last 24 hours celebrating my wedding and partying like there was no tomorrow. I was at my limit. There must have been 50 people at the party. First and second cousins, old friends, new friends, they were all there. More food and alcohol appeared again, placed on tables throughout the living room. This seemed to be enough to feed the entire island. After 3 hours of celebration, I began to silently pray that we would make it to the ship on time and sober. Everyone wanted to meet their new husband, and since Regina had been away for 10 years, there was a lot of socializing. At 5 o'clock, I told her it was time. We packed all our things into the car and headed to the port. I was looking forward to 7 days alone with my new wife. The cruise was full of activity if you wanted to do something. There were 6 stops: St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands, Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, and St. Martin. We were scheduled to return to San Juan on Sunday morning. We couldn't even go to dinner the first night at sea. We ate on the balcony of our cabin and reconnected with each other after the previous 2 days of non-stop action. Regina said she had packed a special surprise for me for each night of our cruise. If the rest of us were half as hot as we were on Sunday, we probably wouldn't have made it to the cafeteria for any meals. By Tuesday, we needed a break. One of the legs of our bed broke. The steward assured us that by evening it would be replaced with a stronger one. We walked slowly around the Virgin Islands and Barbados, buying a few souvenirs, although most of the stuff was geared toward tourists and didn't interest either of us. While we were getting dressed for dinner, I thought about skipping it again. Honey, do you want to skip dinner and order room service again? No way, I want to see something on this ship before we go back to San Juan on Sunday morning. Plus, I really want to check out the food in the mess hall. I gave in after the promise of a special surprise when we returned to our cabin later that evening. Our entire table watched as we took our seats and ordered a bottle of wine. "We weren't sure if we'd even see you on this trip," said one of the middle-aged women. "I understand you're on your honeymoon." Regina smiled and said that they were replacing the bed in our cabin because we had somehow worn it out. I think I blushed when the whole table burst out laughing. The food was great and the company was exciting. We were having a great time. "You should definitely go to the adult comedy show at midnight," one of the women told Regina. "It's for adults only, if you know what I mean." "I'm not sure I can keep my husband for that long, but we'll try to make it in time. Make reservations for us tonight, okay?" We walked around the ship after dinner, gambled a bit in the casino, and finally visited the dance clubs. I danced better than ever for an hour before I sat down to rest. While I was resting, Regina continued to move to the beat of the music, standing next to our table. When one guy came up and asked her to dance, she looked at me. It didn't take her long to make a decision. She smiled at him, but politely refused, showing her engagement ring. "You could do a dance with him," I whispered to her. "Been before, done before, and never again, especially on our honeymoon." I got my ass off the chair and walked back out onto the dance floor. The comedy club was packed, but we finally found our dinner companions. Most of them were already tipsy. Since no one was driving, most likely they decided to enjoy themselves. The comedian was so funny that I almost stained my pants from laughing. When he started making fun of the people in the room, I sank a little deeper into my chair. Where is that newlywed couple who broke the bed in their cabin and had to replace it? Our dinner party pointed at us. "Looking at how hot your wife is, it's no surprise. If you get tired, I'm in room 141, that's 1041. Everyone laughed, but it was good-natured laughter. Regina, not one to let anyone get the better of her, quickly answered him. Well, if you have more than my husband's 12 inches, show me that, and then maybe we can work something out. How about I give you 6 inches twice, was his quick answer. To be half as good as my husband, you'd have to do this at least 4 times. The audience burst into laughter again. But if you don't mind, we have another bed worth trying out, she said, taking my hand. I was also told that no one had ever broken more than 2 beds on a 7-day cruise, but they had not yet met my husband. We came out to a standing ovation. Honey, unless you're confusing me with someone else, I don't have 12 inches. I know, and you know, but the other women on the ship don't know. Now she was smiling. I received a lot of stares from a lot of women the rest of the cruise. I'm sorry to say we didn't break the record for broken beds. We tried our best, but it didn't happen. Sunday morning, we returned to San Juan, and by 10:30, we were on the Big Bird flying home. It was an exhausting and memorable 7 days, to say the least. Thanks to these 7 new outfits, we were able to relive our wedding night over and over again. We slept most of the way back because we knew our new reality was waiting for us as soon as we got off the plane, and it was waiting for us. Mom, Mom, Angela screamed, running towards Regina. I received hugs and kisses, but 99% of her joy was directed toward her mother. On the way back to our apartment, we tried to fit 7 days into 45 minutes. Work started tomorrow, and we all went to bed early, knowing we would wake up to our new normal. Life was better than good. I was usually greeted at the door with kisses and hugs from both of my women. I tried to bring home something special for Angela every Friday night. It didn't have to be something big. She just knew it would be something. One time I almost forgot. I pulled up to our house when I realized I forgot her little gift. I quickly went to the corner drugstore and bought a small stuffed animal. You know, you're spoiling her. You'll never be able to keep this up all the time. She was right. So from that Friday, I started giving her $1 for her piggy bank. Now she met me at the door, holding her piggy bank. After a big kiss and hug, the dollar was placed in a pink piggy bank. I tried to diversify, sometimes change, sometimes paper money, but they were always there. The week before my business trip to another city, Regina seemed a little off, and by that I mean the honeymoon period seemed to be passing. She was still waiting for me, but something was wrong. Although we still made love almost every night, if I didn't know better, I would have thought she had something on her mind. I had to leave for almost 4 days. I called every night, and she said she missed me, but the damn subtext was there. On the flight back, I slept as much as I could because I knew I probably wouldn't sleep the first night home. This was the first time we had been apart since our wedding 3 months ago. When I pulled into the driveway and opened the front door, nothing. No kisses, no hugs, nothing. "Honey, I'm in the kitchen," I heard her shout. She was stirring something on the stove. After drying my hands with a towel, I received my hug and kiss a little later than expected. Maybe I expected too much. She was a little quiet, but Angela more than made up for it. "Regina, are you okay? Are you sick?" "I'm fine, just a little tired, I think. I'll be back to normal by the weekend." She didn't return. My wife spent a lot of time with her mother or on the phone with her. It might have been a little post-wedding blues, or maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but whatever it was getting worse. When she snapped back at me on Friday night for giving Angela $2 instead of 1, I knew something was definitely wrong. When she replied that nothing had happened, I told her that I didn't believe her. That damn little voice in my head was talking to me again, and I didn't like it. On Saturday morning, Regina said that she was going to church for confession. In all the years that I knew her, she never went to confession. Being such a Catholic, what the hell could she possibly profess that was so bad? When she returned, I immediately noticed that she was crying. That what she was hiding was tearing her apart, and indirectly tearing me apart too. "Regina, honey, we need to talk today." "I know, and we'll talk when Angela goes to bed tonight." The inner voices became louder. Dinner was simple, but neither of us could eat much. A little television, a quick bath. 2 chapters of her favorite book, and Angela was out. I found my bride in the living room waiting for me. "Do you want to start, or should I start asking questions?" I said, trying not to be confrontational. "Steve, you have to promise me that you won't get angry no matter what I say." "Regina, I don't know if I can promise that. It depends on what you're going to tell me." "Please promise me." She was already crying. "Okay, I promise. No matter what you tell me, I won't get mad." "Steve, do you know how we discuss everything and make all the important decisions together? It was one of those agreements that we both made before we got married." "Okay, so what haven't we decided together?" "Just remember, it's not entirely my fault. It's just me, that is, we, that is." "Damn it, Regina, spit it out." I spoke a little louder than I intended. "Steve, I'm pregnant. I know you wanted to wait until we moved into the house. I'm so sorry." "How could this happen? When?" I was shocked, to say the least. "Sometime during our honeymoon, I think." "But you took the pills. Did you miss a day or something?" "No, I checked. I started taking the pills 2 days before we left and made sure I took them every day. Before this, we used condoms. Sometimes it was after we had it done or first thing in the morning. My gynecologist didn't have an answer either. She said maybe I should have started a month earlier to regulate my cycle, but even then, sometimes it just happens. Nothing is 100% foolproof. But no matter how it happened, we'll have a baby. Please don't hate me." She began to lose her composure again. "I told my mom and my priest, and both told me I shouldn't hide this from you. They were right. How can I be angry with the mother of my child? Honey, we're going to have a baby. I'm so happy." She screamed with joy, jumped into my arms, and gave me a huge, salty kiss. Okay, I lied, but I'm not Catholic, so it doesn't matter. I was neither delighted nor completely miserable. I really wanted to wait until we got settled a little. But it happened, and I was ready to support her 100%, no matter what happened. I thought she would tell everyone our news at Sunday Mass. She didn't say anything, which surprised me. However, when we entered her parents' house, a real commotion began when she confirmed to her mother that she had finally told me. Non-stop joyful, excited shouts and screams became the norm that day when all the women gathered together, this time planning for the arrival of the baby. The men expressed their condolences to me. They said I had no idea what would happen to me. They wished me luck because I would need it. Grandma was sitting on the side alone. I approached her with dessert for both of us. "Well, you've made it," I told her. "You saw your granddaughter getting married. Now, if only I could live to see my new grandson or granddaughter. You'll outlive us all, and you know it. Just think of a couple of names. We decided we didn't want to know the baby's sex until he or she was born." She smiled, stroked my hand, and kissed my cheek. "Steve, you're a good person. Regina and Angela are both lucky to have you. Just promise me you'll treat them like the treasures they truly are." I solemnly promised that they would be my first priority in life. I officially adopted Angela shortly after our wedding. Her biological father was happy to sign the transfer of parental rights. No one would ever ask him for child support again, and I was happy to become Angela's legal father. "Honey, is your grandma sick or something?" "No, why do you think so?" "Just the way she spoke today, it was like she was kind of saying goodbye. She's just happy for the two of us, and now the three of us. I can't wait for her to see our beautiful baby." I'm sorry to say that 2.5 months after that my grandmother passed away. It was sudden for us, but I think not for her. She somehow knew. They say when one door closes, another opens. I thought that our child would be the door that would open, replacing Grandma. I never expected to lose anyone from my family either. As only her new husband knows, my mother was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. She was undergoing radiation therapy, and doctors thought they had everything under control. The tumor had shrunk enough that doctors considered it possible to remove it. Why she put off the operation for so long can only be guessed at. The only reason her husband could guess was that perhaps she thought that if the operation went badly, She would never live to see her only grandchild. A few months later, it returned with renewed vigor and was now inoperable. Our daughter was born on January 14 at 4 in the morning. Everyone was there, and I mean everyone except my mother. 3 days later, I laid our newborn daughter on my mother's chest in her hospice bed. She held on as long as she could to see her grandson. I'm not sure she was completely herself, but her eyes told me she was enjoying this moment enough. The next 2 days were difficult. I spent most of my time at my mother's bedside trying to come to terms with losing my mother for the second time. My father told her that he had forgiven her and still loved her, which is something I never expected to hear. The next day, her husband Dan and I watched as she stopped breathing and walked away to a life without pain or suffering. She found religion many years ago, and the priest gave her the last of the oils to speed her way to heaven. 5 days after our daughter was born, we still haven't decided on a name for her. We didn't want to just pick a name. We wanted it to be something special that we could tell her years later why we named her that. The answer came to us the next day. We looked at Isabella Jane Moore sleeping in her crib and life became good again. We could tell her about the two guardian angels in heaven that we named her after, who would watch over her and protect her. Both sides of the family came forward for her baptism at St. Timothy's Church. The party at my dad's house almost matched our engagement. In attendance were two proud parents, three beaming grandparents, an enthusiastic sister, and a large extended family that would always look out for her. 3 weeks later, Dan came to our apartment. I saw that he was still grieving. We did everything possible to make him feel comfortable. Your mom went through her own personal hell after she left you and your dad. She may not have always been there, but she always loved you. You can't imagine what it was like for her when you let her come back to your life. It was like a second chance she never had. He spoke with difficulty. Here, he said, handing me an envelope. She wanted you to have it. I looked at Dan, then at Regina, and opened the envelope. It was a check for $75,000. It's the life insurance she took out on you through her job. I didn't know anything about it until after she was dying. Your mom said to tell you that she hopes it makes up for some of the pain she's caused you over the years. All these years, I started crying. I looked back at Dan and Regina. There is also an annuity set up for your daughter, which she will receive when she turns 18. By then, there should be enough in there to pay for her college education. Regina and I thanked him, again saying how sorry we were for his loss. Your mother and I had many good times together. I will miss her very much. All I ask is that you allow me to see your daughters from time to time. I think that seeing both girls will help me remember what I had. After he left, we just looked at each other before hugging. Looks like we'll get our dream home after all. Maybe a little later than we planned, but now the four of us will have a place to call home, thanks to your mother. Next week, Regina and I will celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary. 2 years after Isabella Jane was born, our son, Robert, was born. We are as happy today as we were on our wedding day. Many friends and relatives have left. I think about them every day. 25 years ago, my father remarried, retired after 5 years, and went to live in the Florida sun in a retirement community called Temple Gardens. We visited him once a year for the holidays to spend a week with him and his wife, Julia. On one visit several years ago, we sat on his back porch, enjoying the silence while the women prepared dinner. Dad, I was cleaning out the garage recently, and I found something that I thought you might want to take since I don't need it anymore. I wrapped it up and decorated it with a huge red bow. He opened it, and when he finally saw what it was, he just looked at me and smiled. It worked, didn't it? Yeah, it worked, but I don't need it anymore. It was an equalizer he made me years ago. He slipped his thin hand into the belt, slammed it against his other hand, and smiled. I showed this to Robert when he was growing up. Told him the story of how I only had to use it once. I told him if he ever needed it, it would be there for him. Thank God he never had to use it. I was tough back then. I think I've gotten softer as I've gotten older. Dad, we all change. My father lived for many more years, and then went to have that conversation with my mother that he had promised her many years ago. Regina and me, well, like I said, we are happy, and every time we get ready for bed, I remember our honeymoon, the worn-out bed, and the outfits she wore. She may have gained a few extra pounds over the years, but she's still my hot Latina mom. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.